Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's edition of Gotta Pop. I am thrilled with the guest I have that has joined me today, and his name is Eric Pierce. Eric is a writer, a pop culture lover, and just an all around cool guy. And welcome to the show, Eric.
Thank you, buddy. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. We go kind of far back together, although this is the first time we've actually spoken. I joined Medium a couple years ago as a writer, and I did it with my pen name, Pierce McIntyre. And I started following Fanfare, and I'm like, there's this guy's name is familiar. Eric Pierce is familiar. And then it dawned on me, we'd been connected on social media for many years under, well, you knew me with my real name, Buddy Gott.
Yep.
Um, and I reached out to you because I remembered once it dawned on me. I'm like, oh gosh, I even remember talking on Twitter about music with this guy because I remember once. I remember this. I remember this earlier today. One time I slammed Pearl Jam in a tweet on Twitter, and you were not happy with me because I think you were a pretty big Pearl Jam fan. And I'm like, but on Medium, you have a great publication there called Fanfare. And could you
Yep.
tell my listeners and watchers just a little bit about what Fanfare is about?
Yeah, it's a pop culture publication, primarily focused on film and TV, but we also cover games, music. Um, I ran a public story this week about someone's toy collection because it's pop culture related. It's Transformers, but yeah, it's just an opportunity similar to your publication. I love pop culture and I like talk about it, like think about it. It's kind of the lens through which I like see the world. And so um, that was why I created the publication, and it's been 5 years or something now, and we're pretty big. And yeah, I love it. It's a lot of fun to do.
It is a lot of fun to do. I know one of the first things that I found on Medium was I gravitated towards things that had to deal with pop culture and music, like for example the Riff publication. Then I saw the Fanfare, and I'm like, oh, this is fantastic. I'm reading about, I'm an old school Star Wars fan, and you certainly had a lot of things about Star Wars and other things in there. And what's neat is. Like you said, it covers all kinds of things. And I've noticed that recently that, it seems like it's grown even more where, the focus is not just on movies and games. You've got some television stuff and other things in pop culture. And it's just a lot of fun. I encourage all pop culture, let me try that in English. I encourage all pop culture lovers to check out Fanfare. And you're not just on Medium, though. I know you've got a very popular Substack, correct? For
Yeah, yep,
all the
yeah,
Fanfare?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so my Substack is called All the Fanfare, and it's tied to my own like personal website. Um, I started that up about a year ago, primarily because, so as you know, with being hosted on Medium, you're kind of um, they have an algorithm that kind of decides what gets pushed and what doesn't, and you don't.
Yes.
I have something like 40,000 followers on Medium, but I don't really have that many because not everyone sees everything I
Uh-huh.
publish.
I know what you mean.
So yeah, so the Substack was a way of just saying, okay, who are the people that really like my stuff? Let's get them on a newsletter so they see everything I do. And that was kind of the idea with that, and it's grown, and I have plans for it, and it's super exciting. I'm not going to leave Medium, but it's not. I used to be a Medium writer, and now I'm someone who writes and then I publish stuff on Medium, and I think there's a big distinction there.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean there. And I'm actually brand new to Substack. I just signed up for it maybe last week or the week before. I haven't even done my
Mhm.
first newsletter yet, but writers like you and just fellow lovers of pop culture and just people who enjoy writing have inspired me because I subscribe to your newsletter and it's very entertaining. And I just want to ask you about that because I am
Sure.
someone new. I am someone new to it, and obviously you found quite a bit of enjoyment from it. And what would you recommend now? How often do you publish your newsletters? Have you found a
Yeah.
like sweet spot, or is that something that you kind of had to
I'm
learn over
still
time?
I'm still kind of finding my way with that. I think um, if you're going to do it, I'd recommend you find a regular cadence. If it's once a week or something, I guess I'd recommend like once a week, ideally. Even every other week is probably fine. There are people. I know you're friends with Kevin Alexander. He runs a great
Yes,
music related
yes, he
Substack.
does.
One of the best Substacks I've seen. He
Yeah,
posts
it's very good.
several times a week. Uh, I can't do that. I don't have time to do that. So I just kind of said, well, my focus is going to be I'm going to do a weekly newsletter on Friday and treat it more like a newsletter. So this is what's going on in my life. These are the through a pop culture lens. So these are the things that I'm enjoying right now. Some thoughts on that, and then occasionally I'll also use the newsletter to share, like if I watched a movie, here's my thoughts on it. So something between my writing tending towards longer, and those pieces take a while to write. So the newsletter kind of fills the gap with, if I went to see a movie last week at the theater. These are my thoughts on it.
Hmm.
In addition to just kind of this is what's going on in my life kind of stuff that tend to foster, good relationship with your readers.
Oh, that's great. And yeah, I thank you for advice on all of this. I know for me, I was thinking kind of along the same lines of what you said. Now, I'm thankful I have a pretty good following on Medium right now, but I kind of want to branch out a little bit and not be limited to that. I thought this would be a good way because I have some friends who they'll see me share things on Medium, but they don't have Medium accounts and they don't necessarily want to do that. But I figured the Substack newsletter just seems like a perfect way to connect with people and share different things than I would share maybe on Medium. It's just if
Yeah.
I, like, for example, I have ADHD and I
Mm-hmm.
tend to write about pop culture and things like that on Medium. And if I feel like doing something about, struggles with my ADHD, or I also enjoy meditating, I could do a thing on meditation and I
Mm-hmm.
plan to mix it up and just, I don't know. It's a fun way for people to get to know you. Your friends get to know you
Yes.
better and brand new people who you might not normally connect with.
Yeah, that's true. There's been things that I broke to my parents through my newsletter. Not that I was
Oh,
hiding
really?
it from them. I wasn't like hiding it from them. It's just like I hadn't told them, and then I wrote about it in the newsletter, and like, oh, so I read about this. Because you're right. I think the best use of the newsletter in my experience is kind of being more personal. Like this is what's going on in my life, and my the general theme with mine is pop culture, but I do talk about just in general what's going on in my life. It doesn't always have to be pop culture related, and even if it's not pop culture, there's going to be plenty of references to pop culture. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I think newsletters thrive when they're about the person writing them.
I think so, and I think it just makes it. I don't know. It touches people more. I think my wife and I were just talking about this the other day. We were talking about um, how hard it can be sometimes to gain a following on some social media platforms, such as Twitter/X or whatever it's called next week, or Facebook or wherever. And I
Mm-hmm.
know we're both turned off by people on, say, X, for example, who follow you and immediately they want to try to sell you something. I had someone follow
Yep.
me the other day, and it was actually a semi well known celebrity. I'm not going to call him out here, but I'm like, this is so cool. They followed me, and then like 2 seconds later, I got a DM from them. Hey, could you promote this new book that I have out? I'm like, really?
Uh-huh.
Or that like people's posts will be everything will be buy my book, or do this, do that. And for me, the people that I enjoy following the most are on there, or are people that maybe have a combination of those things. Yes, promote your works, but show
Mm-hmm.
me a little bit of yourself too. If you're unhappy about this or happy about this, or you have a silly joke you want to share, I think it's great to have that real connection with people as much as you can on a
Absolutely.
platform like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you're totally right. I think as writers, it's natural that we're gonna have something, to quote unquote sell, even if it's
Hmm.
just this is my latest article, you can go read it. But I think you need to have the relationship side of it too. Otherwise, no one's gonna care. It's really no different than just sharing a link on Twitter or Facebook,
Yeah.
right? I mean, people are just gonna roll right by it if they don't have a relationship with you.
Exactly. And I know for myself, I found a couple times where I was looking at my feed on Twitter or X, whatever, and
Yep.
I'm like, oh, the last three were all about my podcast, or they were all about articles. I'm like, I wouldn't want to be reading me right now. Share some other things.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And speaking of, and like you said, I think we both, no matter what we're doing, pop culture is going to work its way into it because we are both pop culture. We're a little, different. I'm a little older than you, quite a bit older than you, but we are both, pop culture has always been part of our lives. And I want to go to one thing that the main thing we talked about talking about today was the movie Point Break from
Yep.
1991, and I
Yep.
was I was reading one of your pieces on this, and I know you were pretty young when this came out, and I was amused by what you wrote because you said you were like a 13-year-old with a spiked mullet when this came out, and
I
you were
was. It's
yeah,
true.
so
I look a
felt like
lot
you were a
different
pretty
now.
cool kid. Still cool though, Eric. Still very
Yeah, I
cool.
appreciate that.
So when
Yeah,
this
I had
so
racing stripes too. You neglected to mention that. I had
oh
the racing stripes along the sides.
I boy pictures. You got to post some
Yeah,
pictures of this sometime.
yeah. I didn't have anything, thank goodness.
So when this movie came out, again, you were 13 years old, and
Yep.
I was in my mid 20s when this came out, and I think you probably had the same reaction to it that I did, and a lot of other people did, thinking that, oh man, what a cool movie.
Absolutely, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and
It's
at this point, I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say it's so tying back to the stuff I was talking about, when I launched my own site, all the fanfare, I wanted to spend some time really going deep on something because the idea was the idea behind the site was I don't want to just have another pop culture site. I want it to be different somehow. So my idea was less articles, but more in depth. And so I was like, well, I'm just going to take a movie that I like and really sink my teeth into it. I batted some around, and none of them quite felt right. And then I was like, well, Point Break, and it just it like internally it felt right to me as like kind of the kind of movie I wanted to like dive into. And I think part of that is to what you were just saying, like when it came out, it was like, wow, this is a great movie. And then it's one that as I've gotten older and have watched more, I appreciate even more. Um, and I think it's kind of funny because there's different lenses through which you can watch the movie. There's you can just watch it as a straight action. You can watch it and just kind of almost as a parody because there's points where the movie gets a little bit incredulous with some of the things that happen and
Yes.
um but the heart of the movie is really about the relationship between Johnny Utah and Bodhi, and that's kind of what makes it timeless. And I think that's why I gravitated to it and still do, and movies like that, right, where there's this. I guess I'm becoming like the bromance guy because I keep writing about movies with all these great bromances, and
Nothing wrong with that.
there's nothing wrong with it. But yeah, so I think that's ultimately kind of what I was, without realizing it, that's what I was resonating with when I thought about a movie that I wanted to write about to like launch this site, and why I ended up with Point Break because of that. There's this interesting thing going on with Johnny Utah being the straight laced, attorney kind of guy, FBI agent, and then Bodhi being the very spiritual guy, and but at the same time they're very similar in their competitiveness,
Yes.
and ultimately that's kind of they start kind of pushing each other, and that's ultimately how they connect with each other, and why it ends up being not just it's almost a tragedy because they become friends in the end, right?
Right.
So that's yeah, I think it's super interesting, and yeah, obviously I've written three three long pieces about it, and at some point there'll be a book. But yeah,
And I think that's wonderful. I mean, I've always I love the movie for all the reasons you've just said there. It's always interesting when you see a TV show or a movie or even a book where they get into something like this, where you have two characters, where one is supposed to be a quote unquote good guy and the other is supposed to be quote unquote a bad guy, but they share a lot of similarities. And you see that not all bad guys are entirely bad, and
mm-hmm.
not all good guys are entirely good. And I'm not trying to praise the bad things that, say, Patrick Swayze's character did in the movie, because he did some bad things, but
Yeah,
you still saw that there was a reason to like him. There was some good things inside of him. And yeah, the bromance there is pretty awesome. And there's another bromance that I like in the movie, although it's less of a like a pal bromance. It's with Gary Busey's character.
oh yeah, Agent
Gary
Pappas,
Busey.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's fantastic. He's Johnny Utah's boss, or leader of their group of FBI agents, and he's just awesome. That's probably one of my favorite movies with Gary Busey in it.
absolutely, yeah, yeah. He's just the right of. So Busey has he has levels to his whole like Busey energy.
Yes.
And I feel like Point Break is like the perfect amount of like just slightly crazy Busey, but still like mostly like on the level. And he actually, I feel like in a very kind of meta way, Keanu Reeves, at least in Point Break, is very kind of like almost emotionless for the most part, and
Hmm.
so he pairs really well with Busey, who's a bit more kind of all over the place and excitable, and Utah, give me two, and all
Yeah.
those kinds of things. So yeah, I think you're right. I think their relationship, it is a bromance. It's almost more of a mentor mentee kind of thing, but it
Right.
definitely is a bromance. And what happens to Pappas? It's almost like a love triangle because at the end, Utah chooses Bodie, and
Yeah.
Pappas, spoiler warning, gets shot.
Yeah, and yeah, he's just so good in there. And there's a well, let's just go a little bit over the cast here. You have, of course, Patrick Swayze played Bodie in the movie. Keanu Reeves was
Yep,
FBI agent Johnny Utah, which I just love that name. Such a cool
yep,
name.
it's a classic name.
Yeah, Busey, of course, was Agent Angelo Pappas. You had Lori Petty as Tyler, who was the love interest for Johnny, and she went on to. I mean, she's still acting today, but I know not long after this, she went and started co-starred in A League of Their Own,
Yep,
the Gina
yep,
Davis
another good
movie.
movie. Yep.
Yeah, another good movie, and in smaller roles, but still certainly not insignificant. You had John McKinley. He was an FBI director in that, and he went on to be in Scrubs. I love him on Scrubs. He always plays a good jerk character.
He's an amazing jerk in Point Break, and
He is.
Point Break has got a lot of great lines, and at least half of them are his.
Yeah, it's
So
true. Yeah, he's awesome. And then you got, well, I guess for people who aren't familiar with it, first of all, you should go watch it not long after you
absolutely,
watch this podcast or listen to this podcast, whatever it is you're doing. And it's just so cool. It's Keanu Reeves is a young FBI agent. He's new to the FBI, fairly new. And his name is Johnny Utah. And this big case that he's brought in to work is related to there's been a series of bank robberies out on well in multiple places, but it turns out all these places after the investigators work on it, they realize that they're in places that are popular for surfers to surf, and they figure surfers might be the ones committing these. And the bank robberies happen, and I'd love what you wrote about this in one of your pieces, Eric. It's these guys all wear masks, this team of bank robbers, and there are four of them,
yeah.
and the
Or
masks that they wear are all of ex-presidents.
yep.
And the master, I love what you wrote in your one piece about this, because you actually, it seems like the basis for one of your first articles was about how cool looking these masks were.
Yeah, that was the jumping off point, was because it's always something that I would just always have felt was really cool, like a cool just premise where you
Yeah,
in a cool look, right? Like no other.
very cool
There've been
look.
lots of bank robbery movies, but none of them. And in fact, I think one of the pieces I did, I have a ranking of bank robbery movie masks, and
Yes,
Point
you
Break's
do.
number one. And Point Break's number one for a reason because the ex presidents are legendary. But it's funny because in researching that article, in the original script, the masks were dead presidents. So like the guys on the money, like Washington, Lincoln, those
Oh,
guys.
oh
And
wow.
then James Cameron, who was married to Catherine Bigelow at the time, and James Cameron of Terminator fame and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
He was doing some script consulting, and he suggested it should really be the ex-presidents, which is how we got Reagan and LBJ and Nixon and Carter. So, smart guy,
Yeah.
good
I
move.
think it probably worked out the way that was best there. Not, I'm sure like a
Exactly.
Lincoln mask would have been interesting, but yeah, these masks are pretty cool. I love what you wrote about some. I actually copied it down. Like Nixon, you ranked as the number one of the masks because you had Nixon, Reagan, Carter, and LBJ. And
Yes,
Nixon, you call it the scene stealer. The nose is practically a character itself,
it
which is
is.
true.
It's right.
It's a really
It
cool looking
absolutely is.
mask. Yeah, and Reagan was the mask worn by Patrick Swayze, and
Yeah,
that
yeah,
was really cool. He was like the leader, and you had
yeah.
LBJ. I love what you wrote too. You said you had it was a combination of the Dumbo ears and this like really stupid expression on the face.
Yes, yeah. It's a bad mask, but it only tops Carter because Carter just looks like a normal guy.
Yeah, yeah, like a
Guy,
used car
but like
salesman. But
exactly.
yeah, but so yeah, the plan for getting back to the plot is they want to have Johnny, go and try to infiltrate this gang of bank robbers. So he figures they're surfers, so he takes up surfing, and he kind of finds the group that he figures is the team that robs the banks, and he I don't know. He like you said, he forms this bond with them, but and mostly with Bodhi, who is the leader of them, and he has the love
Yep.
interest with Tyler, and it's not. He gets into surfing, and some of the action scenes in this were involving. I've never surfed. I can barely swim, but
Yeah.
watching this movie, I'm like, oh man, I would love to learn how to do that.
It
There's some
does look
really
really fun.
it does look fun. And it gets
Yeah.
into some other really cool stuff in the movie too, like skydiving. And when I was researching this, I found out that I mean, there's some great action scenes with them with
Mhm.
this with the character skydiving, and I found out that Swayze did like most of the stunts himself, and he made 55 jumps for the film while they were filming
Yeah.
this. I mean, he got
Yeah.
really into it.
He got into it. Do you remember there's that iconic scene where he's in the plane with Johnny and uh they Johnny knows, and everyone knows, like there's no more secret about who the ex-presidents are.
Right.
And Swayze's got the long pistol and he throws it and says adios amigo, and he jumps off the plane and he falls backwards and the camera
Yes.
tracks him. Like he really did that. And it's
That's
just
I
watches
know.
him fall straight down. It's crazy.
That blew my mind to when I found out that he had done all these things. I just watched the movie for well, back when it came out, it was on cable all the time. I used to watch it was on,
Mm-hmm.
so I saw it a lot back then, and I'm sure
Yeah.
you did too,
Yep.
where I knew all the lines of dialogue, and I hadn't seen it for many years. And recently, I saw that it was on one of the pay streaming services that my wife and I have, and I had it saved to our watch list. And I was trying to nudge her towards watching it because she had never seen it. She's like, I don't know if I want to watch a movie about surfing. And it took about a year and a half, and then I finally talked her into it. And when we watched it, she just sat there with her mouth wide open the whole time in some of those scenes, and
Mm-hmm.
she was blown away by it. She loved it, absolutely loved
Yep.
it. And I think it's a movie that that holds up really well. At this,
It
it
does.
came out in '91. And over 30 years later, it's still very popular.
Yeah, I think because they did those stunts, I mean, they're really doing that stuff. So
Yeah.
it does hold up versus, there's no CGI, there's very little special effects. They're really doing a lot of the stuff that you see. And it's funny you mentioned the fact that Swayze did all those jumps. He got apparently he got hooked on it, and
Oh
like he
yeah.
was doing it all the time, and to the point where like the insurance company got involved and were like, you can't do this because it's a big liability if you get hurt.
Oh
So he would
wow.
just he started sneaking off and doing it anyway,
Oh
because
wow.
with him and the other ex-presidents, like they would just go off and jump, and like because they just in a very kind of art imitating or life imitating art, like he really got into the rush of it.
Oh
So
wow. That's pretty
yeah.
wild. And I read that Reeves really got it, and he took up surfing as a hobby himself
Yeah,
after
I think he
doing
still
this movie.
surfs to this day.
That's pretty awesome.
It makes sense if you know that the Keanu vibe is very
Yeah.
surfer kind of esque, so it totally makes sense.
It does make sense. One other person who appears in the movie who is actually much better known for being a singer in a popular rock band than an actor is and I've never is it Kiedis? Is that how you say
I think
it?
it's Kiedis.
Yeah,
I think it's
Anthony Kiedis
Kiedis.
from Red Hot
Listen,
Chili Peppers.
we're both from Michigan, so I'm going to tell you it's Kiedis.
Okay, there you go. There you go. And he plays as this group of like Nazi surfers.
Yeah, right. Really
Yeah,
bad guys. Yep.
really bad guys. It's just a small role in the film, but it's pretty entertaining. And what did you write about it? You wrote something really funny about that, where
I
you
try and
said
write
that
lots of funny things.
you do write a lot of funny things. But yeah, you had
Yeah,
said how. Go ahead.
yeah, so essentially he was so he's if people don't know, he's the front man of Red Hot Chili Peppers. Great band. I love them. So it's kind of a funny thing when Kiedis pops up in this movie, and so his role, there's a fight scene on the beach where uh, Anthony Kiedis and the rest of this neo-Nazi gang jump Johnny essentially and start beating the crap out of him, and then Swayze saves the day. Well, the stunt coordinator on the movie is pretty serious about this stuff, and Anthony Kiedis kept blowing off stunt training because I'm assuming he's touring or something else, but maybe
Right.
just partying. I don't know.
Yeah, we can't
So
rule out partying.
we can't. But so what happens is in that fight, he gets taken out with a punch like really quickly, and that the reason was is the stunt coordinator was like, if you're not going to show up, then you're just going to be out of the fight.
Oh,
So yeah, so that was
so
an
he learned
interesting
his
nugget.
lesson.
Yeah, so and it's kind of funny because later on in the raid, he ends up getting shot in the foot, and it's not a good look at all because he ends up screaming and crying. But it's an interesting cameo for
It
sure.
is. And I found actually what I was referring to a minute ago, where I love that you had shared in your one piece a screen cap of him from the movie, where he had like this kind of interesting look on his face. And you said he somehow manages the impossible feat of looking both tough and goofy at the same time,
Yes, he does. Yeah,
which
it's
is
super
true.
weird. He definitely has kind of like poser energy. Like he feels tough because he's hanging out with tough guys, and he's
Right.
not really a tough guy himself. And actually, I think that's true, just based on what ends up happening to him in the movie. You kind of get a sense for
Yeah,
that.
I think
But
you're right.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
And
yeah, it's funny.
it is funny. And, we talked about the action scenes, and I know that that is, one of the primary reasons that people love this movie. But I think it does go back to what you said earlier, and that's the relationship of the two main characters, of Bodhi and Johnny. And it's great. And I had heard, I don't know if you came across this in your research, or maybe what I had heard years ago was just crap, but I had heard at one point there were plans to do a sequel to the movie. This was
This
a
is
couple,
true. This is
yeah,
true.
it was not too long before Patrick Swayze passed away that this
Yeah,
was, and I remember hearing about that at the time and like, oh, I love the movie. Please don't do this.
yeah.
Please don't do this.
Fortunately,
Um,
so they ended up remaking it, right? Which
yeah.
is tragic, but there was plans, and I think they still are plans somewhere, and maybe it's just like in the vault at the end of Indiana Jones and the last or not Last Crusade, the one with the warehouse at the end.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Um,
Raiders of the Lost Ark, I think.
Raiders Last Ark. Thank you. I was
Yeah.
brain
You're
fart.
welcome.
But yeah, there are plans that the screenwriter on the film and at least the guy who plays Gromit, the youngest ex president, they were
Oh, yeah.
working on
Yeah. Yeah.
together.
Oh, okay.
And essentially, the idea was it picks up 20 years, like right now, essentially with Johnny Utah's daughter, who is kind of going through the same. It really sounds like the same, exact same story we had before, but
Mm-hmm.
just with a modern twist on it.
Oh, okay.
So it sounds kind of bad.
Yeah, it does. But it doesn't sound as bad to me as what I feared at the beginning, because what I had heard was that they had signed Patrick Swayze to do this. And
Okay.
I don't want to give away too much about the original Point Break, but that kind of takes away a big part of the ending of Point Break.
Oh, absolutely. It
Yeah.
ruins it. Yeah,
If
absolutely.
you have Patrick Swayze's Bodhi character in this movie, so I gosh, I wish Patrick Swayze had lived longer, but I'm glad that that movie didn't happen. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
but yeah, and it'll be interesting to see if they do bring back Johnny Utah. Who knows? Sequels are always a big thing, and Keanu has
Yeah.
shown that he doesn't mind doing sequels.
Yeah. No problem with them.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm okay with that. I even love the Bill and Ted that they did a couple years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Although
think as long
I've
as
never seen the John Wick movies. Are you a fan of
you
those?
haven't, oh,
I
wow. The
have
John
not.
Wicks are phenomenal. Yeah. I
They
love them.
look
They're great.
phenomenal. I was
Yeah.
intrigued recently. I'm
If
sorry.
you're
Go
an
ahead, Eric.
action, I was going to say, if you're an action person, if you like action movies, John Wick 1 and especially 2 are just like the upper echelon of just pure action movies. Like
Wow.
they're really good. I mean, plot wise, they're not. I wouldn't put them with like a Die Hard as far as like plot wise and just the story, but just for pure kind of adrenaline pumping action and stunts, like you really can't beat it.
Well, I'll have to check them
I
out.
definitely watch them.
Yeah, I was intrigued recently. Well, I've always been intrigued by them, but for some reason, I just never got around to it. But I saw that there's a new series or a new movie called The Continental, which I guess happens in the same world as John Wick.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
I saw that was on Peacock, which we have, and I'm like, oh well, I don't. I want. I mean, The Continental looked good, but I'm like, I don't want to see that without watching John Wick. So I'll have to
Yeah.
watch
I,
those.
I would definitely recommend it. It's interesting because Point Break is really what put Keanu on the action star path. Initially, when they were casting the role, the studio wanted someone like Johnny Depp or Charlie Sheen, who were kind of up and coming action people. Keanu had just done some he had done Bill and Ted's. Essentially, that was the main thing he was known for, and some other dramas. And Catherine Bigelow was like, "I want to make this guy. This guy's an action star. I want to make him an action star." And she didn't. I don't think she quite got there with Keanu in Point
Yeah,
Break, because then, but then a couple years later, he did Speed, and that was a
right.
huge hit. And then now he's done, the Matrix movies and John
Oh
Wick.
yeah,
So I think her instincts were totally right with him, but
I think you're right.
he wasn't quite developed enough in Point Break. Like, as far as the action and stuff goes, and his acting, you can, when he's in scenes with Swayze, there's a huge difference in what he's
Yeah.
bringing versus what Swayze's bringing.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, he got there. He's turned into
He
a
did.
very,
Yep.
very good, versatile entertainer. Even a musician. But and one thing that
Yep.
we were talking about action movies in general. I had read too when I was reading up on this is that another series of movies I have not seen are the Fast and the Furious, and I heard that that was developed as sort of a reimagined, different version of Point Break, where you had this one cop infiltrating, I guess, this gang of car thieves, and I don't even know much about them to be honest with you, but I found
Hmm.
that interesting that Point Break
Yeah,
actually
it
led
it
to
is
that.
basically, it's Point Break with cars. It totally
Yeah.
is. It's plot. It's like plot for plot. They even, if you're familiar with Fast and Furious franchise, Coronas feature prominently. That actually, they took that took that from Point Break. I
Wow.
think there's a little, like, beach kind of diner bar that's in both movies.
Oh
So
wow.
there's some intentional homages to it. I don't know if you asked the filmmakers, like, I'm sure they would cop up to it. So, but yeah, they're definitely very similar. Kind of scratch the serial numbers off. Point Break, or Fast and Furious is, there's like 10 or 11 movies now. They're definitely more like
There's a lot.
satires or something. Like, they're
Right.
ridiculous now. But the first few are more grounded. And if you watch one, if you're only going to watch one, I'd say watch five. Five is my
Oh,
favorite.
okay.
It's the best one. It's the first one with The Rock, and the
Oh,
action
nice.
scenes are just over the top. So that's, in my opinion, that's the best one.
Okay, well, I will check that out. And speaking of homages to Point Break, I had seen I didn't notice this when I saw it, but there was a Point Break reference in the first Avengers movie where Tony Stark
Oh,
actually calls Thor Point Break because of his
yeah.
similarity, his
I
hairstyle
think
being
because of his,
similar to Bodhi.
yep.
And then I heard it was even worked back into the last Thor movie. Was it how do you say it, Ragnarok
It was
or
Ragnarok. Yeah,
Ragnarok?
the
Where I think
third
there
one.
was.
That's the third one. Yeah,
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, that's right. Because there was another one, Love and Thunder or
Love and
something like.
Thunder.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's forgettable.
Yeah. It was. I don't even think I watched the whole thing to be honest with you. I remember, but anyway, that's a whole
It's
other.
the one
That's a
with the
whole other
screaming
show.
goats.
Oh.
If that triggers anything in your mind.
Yes. Yes. That's right. That's right. Yeah, that is quite memorable. But
Yeah.
yeah, Point Break, such a great movie, and really, folks, if you haven't seen it, check it out. And oh wait, I do want to go back to the sequel now. Or I'm not the sequel, the remake from 2015.
Hmm.
I couldn't bring myself to watch it. And I know
I
that
couldn't either.
maybe that's
I couldn't either.
narrow-minded of me, but I
Yeah.
just couldn't do it. I was reading about it. I'm like, okay, I think there might be some surfing in it, but I guess they're all like extreme sports people that do mountain climbing and all kinds of things. And
Hmm. I'm not
uh,
opposed to remakes,
yeah,
um,
me
if
either.
they're done well, because I think there's been, like, specifically westerns, like 310 to Yuma. That was a great remake. Love that
Yes,
movie.
yes, that was good call.
So I'm not opposed to remakes, but I feel like it has to be more than just the play, banking on name value recognition, right?
Yeah,
So, and I felt like, and I didn't want to see it, but if the reviews had been really good, I probably would have tried it at least.
I think I would have been the
Um,
same way.
but like, I'm right now, I'm writing about a big piece about White Man Can't Jump, another classic '90s movie,
Yeah,
and they recently remade that one too. And I also have no desire to watch it because the
yeah.
original is so good. And why would I?
Exactly. Yeah. And like you, I'm not opposed to remakes. And I understand too how sometimes you have a very popular storyline that's produce or film companies might think, well, let's redo it because, that'll touch audiences who maybe wouldn't watch those things that are 30 years old. And
Hmm.
I get that, but you have to, I don't know, you have to honor the original, but not make it too different. There's that.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it sounded like
yeah.
Point Break was a lot different in a lot of ways. And yeah, I apologize if anybody affiliated with that movie is watching this. You're probably not, but maybe I'll give it a shot someday. But what else did I want to tell you about? Oh, one thing I saw that was kind of cool about that remake, though, is apparently it featured two of the actors who played in The Ex Presidents as FBI directors in it.
Oh yeah,
James
yes,
LaGrosse or LaGrosse, and
yeah.
the other guy whose name I can't remember right now.
Bo Jesse.
Yes, Bo Jesse,
Yeah,
which is kind of cool. I like that they,
that is
kind of
cool.
did that. But while it's cool, it wasn't enough for me to be drawn in to see the movie.
Absolutely.
And talking
Yeah.
about stories, Eric, you and I
Mhm.
are both doing this thing right now that happens every November for writers, and it's November. If for people who don't know, is considered to be National Novel Writing Month. It's something that started about 25 years ago. It also goes by NaNoWriMo or NaNoWriMo, whichever way you want to pronounce it. And the deal with it, for those who don't know, is you're supposed to, work on a story, really dive into it hard in November, and the original goal was to write 50,000 words, and because that's the minimum of what would be considered a novel. But people have kind of like played around with that over the years and just use it as a chance to work on whatever projects they're doing. And we both decided to do this year.
Yep.
And is this the first time you've done it, Eric, or have you done it in
Nope.
years
Nope.
past?
I think when I looked at my profile when I signed up for this year, it said 2011 was the first year I did it.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and I haven't done it consistently. It hasn't been 12 years straight. There were several years where I just didn't do it at all because I was working on fanfare or whatever, and I just said I'm not going to write any fiction. But this year, I got into writing because of books and fiction, and that's even though I love pop culture and writing about it, like books and writing fiction is still kind of my north star. It's still the thing that I'd like to do. Right, is write a nice fiction book, and I've written some in the past, and I wanted to get back to it. So I said, similar to what you were saying, I said I'm not gonna have a goal to finish a book. I've got several things that are in a state of completion, like 50% or something, and I'm just gonna knuckle down and write some fiction. And and it doesn't have to be 50,000 words even. So far
Yeah,
I've written
that's
like
how I feel.
five, but like it's uh it's moving me forward, and so that's the
Exactly.
way I'm approaching it.
And to me, that should be the goal. I've seen
Yep.
some people who get very, very, I don't know, angry about it if they see that people aren't going for the 50,000 words, where they're like, well, you have to hit, 1,667 words every day in order to reach your 50,000. If not, you're slacking. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
no, maybe that's what's cool for you. And, yay for you if you're doing that. But yeah, like you, I just want to be moving forward with my
Yeah.
story. When I sat down to do this, I basically had a character that I liked, but I didn't know exactly what he was going to be doing. I didn't know what his story was yet. I knew he
Hmm.
was going to be sort of this quirky character who is a detective, and he was probably going to get involved with some sort of murder mystery in some small town. And I just started writing it, and I was stumbling at first because I didn't have a plot yet. The plot
Right.
was kind of coming to me as I'm writing about him arriving in this town, meeting people, and then suddenly it turned into something far, far different than what I planned. And I'm fine with that. Like, it was going to be just a
Hmm.
standard thing at first. Now it's turning more into a paranormal mystery. And originally so there may even be vampires and ghosts in this. I'm not sure yet, but that's
Hmm.
part of the fun, I think, of doing something like this. I'm
Absolutely.
all for people doing outlines for stories. Sometimes I use them, sometimes I don't. Sometimes it's fun to just fly by the seat of your pants. And a lot
Absolutely.
of writers are known as pantsers because that's the way
Yep.
they do it, and you can really come across some fun things that way. So
Yeah,
yeah, like
that's
like you, I don't intend to get 50,000, but just want to keep moving forward with it.
it's yeah, you're totally right though. I mean, I think there's a purity to storytelling when you just come to the page with no intentions other than to like find out what's there. Um my natural inclination is to be a pantser. Like I don't like making plans or outlines. I just like to have a vague idea of what could happen, and then I just kind of see what does happen. Um, the downside of that is a lot of times you'll end up wasting time and words
Hmm.
because you'll be like, yeah, that wasn't a. I spent today, writing 1,000 words. That ended up being a wild goose chase that I'm just gonna kind of go back to where I was yesterday and start over.
Right, right.
Um, but I don't know. I think a lot of times when you're in the heat of the moment, things occur to you that will never occur to you when you're just outlining. which is
I
why
completely agree.
that's why I prefer it of the two options. I think ideally, I think you do a little bit of both. You do enough planning up front to just, keep you just so you have some rails, right? So you have a general idea, but then you leave yourself
Right.
open to what's going to occur to you while you're doing it.
Yeah, and I think like you said, it becomes sort of like this hybrid of both things. Like what I found beneficial for me sometimes is at the beginning of a writing session, maybe jot down even in my notebook, okay, this is what I want to write today. It could be just like
Hmm.
2 or 3 lines saying, Sam is going to go into this bank that is about to be robbed, and then whatever develops from there, fine. I don't have to have like every page,
Yep.
outlined out before, just a vague thing. And writing is such a unique thing, for everybody, and it can vary from story to story. Some work better with outlines, some without. I know, especially years ago, I was working on some very, very intricate murder mystery where it was. I don't want to compare myself to Agatha Christie, but it was one of those things where it was sort of like a locked room where you had all these things that very intricately happened, and for that I needed to
You
plan
have
it out.
to.
Yeah, you
Absolutely.
have
You have
to. You
to.
can't. You
Yeah.
you can only wing it so much with something like that.
Yep.
So, but yeah, it's cool you're doing it and moving forward with your story.
Yeah.
I don't want to pry too much, but
It's,
what's the genre that you're working on?
uh, I tend to write, fantasy or science fiction because I'm just a big nerd. I play Dungeons and Dragons. I watch Star Wars. Like, so Um, I have a steampunk fantasy series that I started writing
Oh,
years ago, and this is the third book in that, and that I'm trying to finish.
oh, very
So
cool.
that's the plan. Yeah, it's based on because everything ties back to pop culture. I don't know if you remember Firefly, the TV show from
Oh, I
like
loved
20 years ago.
Firefly. Yeah.
Yep. So the show, my steampunk fantasy is based on that. Essentially, it's about a group of scoundrelly people who are just trying to survive on the fringe, and um, that was the jumping off point. I mean, the captain's name is Mel, as in Melanie, but it's
Oh,
obviously an homage to Malcolm Reynolds, and
yeah. Oh, that's
yeah,
awesome. I love
yep,
that. That
yeah.
was such a good
So
series. Such a good
it's
series.
one of my favorite. I started rewatching it recently, and it's funny because you can tell it's 20 years old. The effects at the time were
Yeah.
not the best, and now it's 20 years later. But like the humanity and the humor is what you come for, and it's still the best part of the show. It still makes me laugh, even though I know it pretty well by now. I've seen it so many times, but I love it. It's a great show.
It is. I didn't watch. Oops, I'm gonna beat up my microphone there. I didn't watch it when it first aired, but I just heard so much about it. And one day I was in some store, they had the whole series there, like reasonably priced. I'm like, I'm just gonna buy the DVD, and I watched it.
Hmm.
And I think that was my whole weekend. I just
Hmm.
watched one episode and just loved it immediately. And
Yeah,
I've heard talk about that one being remade too, and I'm like, I
they've
don't
been
know.
saying that for a while, and
Yeah.
they had the cast like Nathan Fillion, who plays Malcolm Reynolds. Like he's been on like Comic Cons and stuff like 10 years ago, where there was interest in it for sure. I think at this point the cast is probably a little too old.
Yeah.
I think I've heard about them maybe bring it back as an animated series because then they could
Oh.
provide the voices, which would be maybe a nice compromise, and I would be open to
Oh,
that for sure.
I think that might have some promise. That could be
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
All right. Well, that's something to keep an eye out for, and I'm sure if that happens, I'll be reading about it in Fanfare.
You absolutely will. I'll be recovering it obsessively. Absolutely. It's kind of funny. Going back to what you were talking about at the beginning, how you and I have known each other for quite a while. Like, I think of all of my writing friends, you may be one of the longest, the ones that I've known the longest. But in talking about fiction, but I believe we met through the self-publishing podcast.
Yes, that's where we first
They
got to know each other.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was probably 10 years ago now or something, but it
I
was
think
it
it
was
was. Yeah.
fiction that we were
Yeah.
bonding over. Yeah.
Exactly, unfortunately, that show is no longer around. But it had a good run. I think it was like close to 10 years that it was
Yeah.
on
Yep.
YouTube, and then of course they had the audio version of it too. And yeah, if I encourage people to like check out the fiction of these guys and some of their nonfiction about writing. And you've had
Yeah.
Johnny B. Truant and Sean
Yep.
Platt
Sean Platt,
and yeah, David Wright.
Dave Wright. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I don't know if you did you know that Johnny's series of books, Fat Vampire, was turned into a TV series?
I did hear about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't. I forget. It's called something else for the TV series. It's on Sci-Fi. I
Yeah.
think the vampire. I was about to say Armand, but that's something totally different. That's Anne
Yeah. I
Rice.
don't, I
Yeah.
just, yeah, I just knew I just saw the announcement, but I didn't see like what the fruition of it. Yeah. I haven't seen what it became, but yeah.
Yeah, but it was fun
It's
because
interesting because during that show's peak, they gave you kind of an inside view into what self-publishing is and what it could be,
hmm
and the trials and tribulations of it. Like they were very honest about what they're doing, what they're going through, and I feel like for a lot of us who were just starting out, it gave you a sense that you weren't in it alone, and what you're trying to do was actually possible. So
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. It was really something because, like you said, you were part of their journey. Really, they did a show
Hmm.
live once a week, and like you and I and others, we became regulars in the comments section where we would watch the
Yep.
shows live if we could, or if not, we commented later. And you would see like if they released a book, and these guys release books like at such an amazing schedule. They put out several every
Yeah.
year, and if one didn't do well with the public, or maybe it was critically bashed a little, you'd see them sharing their pain and
Yeah.
frustration over that, and what they learned from it, and then maybe incorporating that into what they did next and trying to do better. And yeah, I encourage people to check out those. I think those episodes are still on YouTube.
I
And
sure they're still out there. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I had them on my old show. I used to have a show called Buddy's Writing Show, and I had those three on there a couple times, and they're really
Did
such
you?
good
That's
guys. Yeah.
amazing. That's
Yeah, they're
awesome.
they're good guys, good guys. And Eric, gosh, I could talk to you about all this stuff for a long, long time, but I think we kind of reached a good stopping point here. And
It's natural. Yeah.
yeah, and really, I thank you for being on the show. It's fun talking with you about writing and about movies and music. That's another. Oh, do want to touch upon one really cool song from Point Break. Are you a fan
Okay.
of Rat? Do you remember the band Rat?
I remember Rat. Yep. They've
Yeah,
got a
they
song
had
in
it.
Point Break.
Yeah,
Yep.
they do. It's on the closing credits, and it was just a really,
Yep.
really cool song. And there was some good stuff in there. You had a mix of like, the rock that was popular at that time. I don't know if the Red Hot
Yep.
Chili Peppers actually made it into the movie or not.
I
I
don't
know.
think they had a
I don't
song,
think
which
they did.
feels like a wasted opportunity, right?
I
Seems
think
like they
so
could have
too.
gotten something done on the cheap with Anthony Kiedis in the movie, but
Yeah,
yeah, I
but
don't
it's
think they did.
yeah, it was gosh, such a good movie, and I was thrilled to talk with you about it because when I saw your articles about it, which I'm going to include links on here on YouTube or Spotify, wherever you're watching or listening to this, to Eric's articles that he has on was medium.com, but then it's like, is it fanfare.com as well?
So it's fanfare.pub.
Of
That's
dot pub,
hosted
I'm
on
sorry.
Medium. But you could just if you just go to allthefanfare.com, you'll find everything I've got.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
include links to all of that in the notes for the show. So, Eric, thanks again. This was a blast, my friend.
It was a good time. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And all of you, thank you for being a part of our show today. Have a great day.
See ya.